Welcome to the Midnight Codex, where forgotten truths breathe and shadows tell their tale. Tonight, don't blink and don't look behind you.
I need to write this down. Maybe someone will believe me. I don't know how much time I have left. Time here doesn't make sense. It started the day the letter came. No return address, no name, just a plain white envelope sealed with black wax. I know what you're thinking. It sounds like the beginning of some bad thriller, doesn't it? But it wasn't. It was the beginning of something worse, much worse. I wasn't exactly in the best place when it arrived. I'm in my late 30s now, and work has been a struggle. Jobs come and go, but lately they've been going. I can't blame anyone for not hiring me. I've got a track record. One too many bad decisions, one too many wrong turns. And that last one? It hurt. Losing my job was just the cherry on top of this miserable cake. So when the letter showed up, I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed it was just another scam, some desperate attempt to get my attention. But something about it caught me. The wax seal. The thick, crisp paper. It didn't look cheap. It looked official. Too official for me to ignore. The letter was simple, almost clinical. It read, "We are offering you a position as a night security guard at a classified facility. Pay is above standard. Terms attached." That was it. No name, no signature. Just an address, a place in the middle of nowhere. At first I thought it was a joke, a cruel prank. But then I thought about it. The pay was too high to ignore, especially for someone in my position. I was drowning, and this might be the lifeline I needed. I'm not proud of it, but I needed it. Desperation has a way of making you do things you never thought you'd do. And, well, I figured, why not? What's the worst that could happen? So I packed my bags, gathered the last of my savings, and set off to the location they'd provided. A place so remote that even my GPS failed me halfway through the drive. The facility was bizarre. I mean, it was huge, more like a complex than a single building, but it didn't feel right. The closer I got, the more uneasy I became. The buildings were all painted a stark, oppressive white, standing tall like sentinels. The roads were quiet. Too quiet. There were no people, no cars, nothing to suggest that this place had ever been used. As I approached the entrance, I saw the first guard. He barely looked up when I arrived, just a nod and a grunt like he was expecting me. He didn't even check my ID, just waved me through. "Welcome," he said flatly. His voice was like dry sandpaper. "Your shift starts in 10 minutes. Don't worry about the details." I didn't know what to make of it. Something in the way he said it unsettled me. Didn't have time to dwell on it. I needed this job. Desperation makes you ignore your instincts. Inside the facility, everything was empty. The walls were sterile, a blinding white that seemed to stretch on forever. There was no sign of life, no indication of what was happening in this place. Just silence, broken only by the hum of overhead lights. I met my supervisor, a man named Victor, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were sunken, his hair unkempt. He didn't smile when he greeted me. He simply handed me a thick folder and said, "Here's the job description. Follow the rules. Everything else will make sense in time." I took the folder, my fingers brushing against his cold, dry skin. The paper inside was thick, almost like parchment, and it felt wrong in my hands. I opened it, and what I saw froze me in place. The rules. Do not attempt to contact anyone during your shift. Do not leave your station under any circumstances. Do not acknowledge any sound you hear from the other rooms. Time here does not follow the conventional cycle. You may experience disorientation. Always lock every door you pass, especially the exterior doors. I stared at the rules, my heart pounding in my chest. They were vague, unsettling. Why couldn't I acknowledge sounds? Why couldn't I leave? Time doesn't follow the conventional cycle. What does that even mean? But Victor didn't wait for me to ask questions. He turned, gave me one last empty look, and walked away. I tried to push the unease to the back of my mind as I walked to my station. There was something off about the whole place. The silence was almost suffocating, like it was waiting for something to happen. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. I settled into my station. The first few hours were uneventful. I checked the cameras, walked the hallways, sat in the small office where they told me to stay. But it didn't take long for the oddities to begin. The clocks were the first thing that caught my attention. I checked my watch. 10 p.m. I glanced up at the wall clock. It read 10:10 p.m. Fine, no big deal. But then I checked it again. And again. It was jumping around. One moment it was 10:10, the next it was 9:15, then 10:50. I couldn't explain it. Every time I checked, it was different. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the clocks were broken, but I couldn't ignore it. Something was wrong. I picked up the phone to call Victor, but the phone rang, and when I answered, it wasn't him on the other end. A voice I didn't recognize said, "You're not supposed to question the rules." The line went dead before I could respond. The hair on my neck stood up. Now I'm sitting here, writing this. I don't know how much time has passed since that phone call. I don't know what's real anymore. The clocks are still messing with me, and I'm starting to wonder if I'm losing my grip on reality. I need to find out what's going on, but I'm starting to think there's no way out of here. Maybe that's the point. The facility felt like a maze. Endless, sterile hallways stretched out before me, their cold white walls pressing in as though they were closing in on me. The hum of the fluorescent lights was the only sound, a constant reminder of the isolation. I was alone here. Alone, with nothing but the thin folder in my hands. Victor, the man who had given me the job, handed it to me without a word. His eyes never met mine, his gaze fixed somewhere else, as though he were looking through me rather than at me. His expression was blank, unreadable. He slid the folder across the table and walked away without another word. The folder felt heavier than I expected. I opened it. Inside were the rules. The rules: never look at the clocks. Do not enter room 13. You will hear sounds, but no one will be there. Do not investigate. If the lights flicker, remain still. Keep your walkie-talkie on at all times, but do not answer it. My eyes lingered on the paper. Do not enter room 13. My mind flashed to the door I'd passed earlier. Plain, unmarked. Something about it felt wrong. I pushed the thought away. I had no reason to worry about that room. Yet, the other rules weren't any better. Never look at the clocks. That one felt odd. What kind of rule is that? It didn't make sense, but what choice did I have? The rest were similarly strange, almost as though they were designed to keep me from seeing something or doing something I wasn't supposed to. Victor had said nothing more about the rules. His silence had felt like a warning, not just about the job, but about everything inside this place. I stood there for a moment, holding the folder, feeling the weight of the rules settle around me like a heavy cloak. Don't look at the clocks. I'd already broken that one. The question gnawed at me. Why? I had to follow them. I knew that much. Don't investigate, the paper warned, and yet every part of me screamed to do just that. But the job wasn't about questioning the rules, was it? I needed to keep this job. I forced myself to focus on the task at hand. The first hour passed without incident. The hum of the lights, the silence, the endless halls. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but there was something beneath the surface. I felt it in the air, like the building was waiting for something. Then the clock caught my eye again. It was 9:57 p.m. when I first noticed the shift. The second hand on the wall clock jumped ahead by several minutes, then stopped. I blinked. It couldn't have. It had to be a mistake. But I looked again. 9:57, then 10:05. It didn't make sense. I shook my head. Maybe it was faulty. The clock was just broken. I wasn't supposed to be looking at it anyway. Minutes later, the lights flickered. It wasn't much at first. A simple blink, a flicker of the fluorescent tubes above, like a bad connection. But the longer I stood there, the more I began to feel the pull of the rules. I wanted to move, to walk away, but the paper flashed in my mind. If the lights flicker, remain still. So I did. I stayed as still as possible, holding my breath. My heart hammered in my chest. The silence was overwhelming. The flickering continued for what felt like minutes, stretching the seconds. Then it stopped. Everything went dead quiet. Too quiet. That was when the sound started. It was faint at first, just a tapping, a slow, deliberate tapping, like fingernails against the walls. It echoed, soft and distant. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. There was no one around, no movement, but the tapping continued. I glanced at my walkie-talkie. Nothing. No messages, no static, just empty air. The sound grew louder, closer. It wasn't from the monitors. It wasn't from anywhere I could see. Don't investigate, I reminded myself. But still, I stood frozen, listening to the tapping. It was coming from the hall right outside my station. My mind screamed to look, but my body wouldn't move. I wanted to know what was causing it. But the rules, they kept me still. The tapping stopped suddenly. I exhaled, my chest tight with the weight of silence. I stayed still for what felt like hours, but then I had to look. Just a glance, I told myself, a quick glance. I turned toward the clock again. It was 10:05. No, it was 9:53. I had no idea how long I'd been standing there, but now everything felt off. The air, the silence, the stillness of time. It was as though the clock had moved backward. My heart raced, and I turned back to the hallway, the screens, anything to focus on. The tapping returned, more insistent this time. But I knew better than to look. I couldn't investigate. Then, something strange happened. One of the monitors shifted. At first, it was just a flicker, static, almost like interference. But then I saw something, a shadow. It moved across the camera feed, a dark shape passing by in one of the hallways. It was a fleeting image, but unmistakable. A figure. I stared at the screen, unable to look away. The figure wasn't clear. It was a shadow of something, or someone. It didn't belong. I was sure of it. I immediately looked away, my heart pounding in my chest. The rules. I was not supposed to look, but I had seen it. I grabbed the walkie-talkie. The urge to speak, to question, it burned inside me. But I knew better. The rules, again. Don't answer it, I whispered to myself. I sat there, frozen. The silence swallowed me whole. Minutes passed, or was it hours? Then, the voice came. Low, hushed, static. You're not supposed to be here, James. We are watching you. I froze. It wasn't my voice. It wasn't anyone I knew. It wasn't a coincidence. I scrambled to turn off the walkie-talkie. The voice continued, crackling in the air. The words were barely audible, but they were there. You don't understand. They will come for you. The static grew louder, drowning out the voice. I slammed the walkie-talkie down onto the desk. I looked up at the clock once more. It was 10:05 again, but this time, the shadows on the monitor had moved closer. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It was the kind of silence that's never really quiet. It hangs in the air, thick and oppressive, like the weight of 1,000 unsaid words. And that's when I realized time wasn't moving normally here anymore. One moment, I'd glance at the clock, and it would be 2 a.m. I'd look back a few minutes later, and it would be 9 a.m. No logical explanation, no reason for it. The facility around me remained eerily unchanged. Same lights, same empty hallways, same humming air conditioning that made the silence even more pronounced. I could feel myself start to lose grip on time. Was I slipping into madness? Or was something far more sinister happening here? The first time it happened, I chalked it up to fatigue. I couldn't have really lost 7 hours, right? But the next time it happened, I wasn't so sure. I checked the clock. 2:03 a.m. I looked up again, and before I knew it, it was 9:15 a.m. I froze. Was I hallucinating? I checked my watch. Same thing. Time was bending. I'd been awake for hours, but this felt wrong. How could it skip like that? I glanced at the monitors. The facility was still empty, silent. The clock showed no mercy. 9:15 a.m. But was it really? I tried to ignore it, but the unease gnawed at me. What if I was losing my mind? Or worse, what if the facility was messing with time itself? I stood there, watching the monitors as I tried to steady my breath. The same flickering lights, the same empty hallways, but this time, there was something different. The air had changed. It felt colder, much colder. I glanced at the temperature gauge, 58 degrees Fahrenheit. That wasn't normal. I should have felt warm, surrounded by the usual hum of the air system, but it was as if the temperature was dropping in waves, creeping up my spine like icy fingers. I forced myself to keep moving. Don't think about it. Focus on the job. The cold persisted. It was harder to ignore now, seeping into my clothes, my skin. I made my way down the hallway, trying to calm my nerves, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I couldn't tell if the building was getting colder or if it was just me, but I felt the air grow dense, like it was pressing in on me. The walls seemed to close in with every step I took, the silence growing louder. That's when I heard it. A faint tapping. It was soft at first, barely audible over the hum of the lights, but it was there, unmistakable. I stopped dead in my tracks. I looked down the hall. Nothing. Just more empty space. The tapping continued. It was rhythmic now. Closer. I didn't move. I didn't dare. It came again. A faint tap. Tap, tap, tap. The sound grew louder, sharper, but I saw nothing. No one. No movement. I glanced at the clock again. 9:17 a.m. I didn't remember seeing that time before. My heart raced. I had to move. I kept walking, but the tapping didn't stop. I could hear it everywhere now, in the walls, in the floorboards. It was like the building itself was alive, mocking me, pulling me deeper into its grip. I pressed my hand to the cold concrete wall and forced myself to keep moving. The sound of my footsteps echoed down the hall, a stark contrast to the strange rhythmic tapping. The walls seemed to close in tighter, my breath coming in short bursts. And then, as if the building had a mind of its own, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Stay still. I felt my legs freeze, my body obeying the rules. I wasn't supposed to move. The words rang in my mind like an order I couldn't disobey. The flickering intensified. I could see my reflection in the dim light, my face pale, eyes wide with fear. The reflection seemed to shift. Was it just the flickering? Or was I changing? I closed my eyes, my heart pounding. I couldn't move. When I opened my eyes again, the lights were back to normal. The temperature still dropped, and the tapping. Gone. But then, something was different. I was no longer alone. At the far end of the hall, standing in the shadows, I saw it. A figure. It wasn't clear at first, just a dark shape. But I knew it. I could feel it. The figure was tall, its form slightly distorted, like it was out of sync with reality. It stood motionless, watching me. I felt a chill run down my spine. My blood ran cold and I froze in place. It stood there for what felt like an eternity, its form shifting in and out of the shadows like it didn't belong in this world. Then, just as I was about to move, it disappeared. Vanished. I blinked. Nothing. I tried to breathe, to calm myself, but my heart wouldn't stop racing. Was I hallucinating? I had seen it. The figure had been real. The sound of the walkie-talkie startled me. I grabbed it, my hand shaking. The static hummed in my ear before a voice crackled through. "You're starting to see it, James. We've been waiting." The voice was cold, robotic, and familiar, but I couldn't place it. The static crackled again before the line went dead. I stood there, staring at the walkie-talkie, my hands frozen around it. The hallway was silent. The figure was gone. The tapping had stopped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that something wasn't right. I looked at the clock. It was still 9:17 a.m. Had I missed something? Had I been here for hours, or had I somehow slipped into another time, another reality? I couldn't stay here any longer. But where could I go? This place was becoming more than I could handle. The building was changing. The time was changing. And I was caught in the middle of it, stuck in a loop I couldn't escape. The temperature dropped again, colder than before, until I could see my breath in the air. I was shaking now, my skin crawling with a sense of being watched, as if every corner of the building was aware of me, waiting for me to break the next rule. I reached for the door to leave, but just before I touched the handle, a whispering voice echoed in my ear. "You can't leave, James. You're remembering, but you're not ready." I froze. The voice felt like it was inside my head, echoing from everywhere. And that was when I realized the truth. I wasn't just trapped in this place. I was being kept here. I had been at the facility for what felt like days. Or was it weeks? Time, at this point, had become nothing more than a faint memory, warped beyond recognition. I tried to keep track, but the truth was, I wasn't sure what was real anymore. The corridors stretched on forever, the sterile white walls suffocating me. Every time I thought I had a grip on time, it slipped from my fingers like sand. And then I realized it wasn't just time that was slipping away. Something far worse was happening to me, to this place. I had to understand what was happening. I had to find out the truth. It started with the footage. I had been sitting at the security desk for hours, going through routine checks. The building was silent, like it always was. Too silent, if I'm being honest. But there was something about the quiet tonight that felt different. Something wrong. I had seen the footage hundreds of times, but tonight I felt the need to go back through it again. Maybe I was just tired, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had missed something important. So I rewound the video from earlier in the evening. The first thing I noticed was the room. A room that shouldn't have been there. It flickered into view for a moment, just long enough for me to register that it existed. But when the feed replayed, the room was gone. Disappeared. Like it had never been there. I rewound the footage again and again. It was still there. I could feel my pulse quicken. How was this possible? The camera angle hadn't changed. The hallway hadn't moved. The room had just appeared, then vanished. I zoomed in on the timestamp, 8:12 p.m. That's when I saw it. The room flickered back into view, clear as day. The walls were drab, the door plain and unmarked. It should have been nothing, a technical glitch or a trick of the light. But something about it unsettled me. The facility was too clean, too controlled for glitches. There was no room for error here. I paused the video and examined the footage more closely. There was no way that room was supposed to be there. Then came the second anomaly. At first it was just a shadow, a figure passing through a wall. But this wasn't just a flicker of light. This wasn't a trick of the eye. This was a person walking through the solid concrete. My stomach twisted. I rewound the footage, zoomed in on the screen. There it was again. The figure. A man dressed in dark clothing. He didn't open a door. He didn't walk around it. He walked through it like it was made of air. The figure didn't even flinch. I was stunned, my mind racing to understand what I was seeing. The figure shouldn't have been there. No one had access to this area. No one except for me. I couldn't breathe. The first rational thought that crossed my mind was, I was seeing things. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me, but I couldn't deny what I had seen. I switched to another camera feed, another hallway. Again, something I couldn't explain. I saw another figure, this time a woman. She was wearing a white coat, standing in a hallway that should have been empty. The woman's movements weren't normal. She wasn't walking. She was floating, moving through the hallway as if gravity didn't apply to her. I felt my hands start to shake. This wasn't normal. None of this was normal. But it didn't stop there. As I fast-forwarded through more footage, I saw more oddities, more figures flickering in and out of sight, people who weren't supposed to be there, things that couldn't exist in a place like this. I could feel the walls closing in. The room from earlier appeared again, then disappeared. Then I saw it. I saw myself. I saw me. I wasn't sure at first. I rewound the footage and looked again. It was me, walking down the corridor. I felt my heart drop into my stomach, but it was impossible. I hadn't walked down that hallway. I hadn't been near that part of the building, and yet there I was, in the footage, walking toward the same door I had seen earlier. The timestamp read 8:12 p.m. Same as before. Same time as when I saw the room. I couldn't breathe. I watched the footage over and over, trying to piece together what I was seeing. I hadn't walked down that hallway, but there I was. I had to be dreaming. I had to be. But then I realized I wasn't alone in this place. I was being watched, and worse yet, I was part of the experiment. I stood up from the desk and paced the room. My thoughts were a blur, but one thing stood clear. This wasn't a mistake. The footage wasn't corrupt. The rooms, the figures, they were real. The facility wasn't just a secret lab. It was something far darker. It was a place where time itself was being manipulated. A place where the fabric of reality was being tested, bent, and broken. The realization hit me like a hammer. The room that had disappeared and reappeared, the figures that passed through walls, the strange distortions in time, they weren't just anomalies. They were all part of something far greater. The facility was conducting time loop experiments, memory manipulation. The people I had seen in the footage, they were part of it. They were test subjects, just like me. I wasn't just a security guard. I was a subject in their twisted experiment. The facility wasn't storing information. It was manipulating memories, testing the very limits of time. I had been brought here not as a guard, but as part of their trial, their test. And I had been in this loop before. It made sense now. The shifting time, the repeating patterns, the glitches. It wasn't a system. Failure point. It was the way the facility was designed. The facility wasn't just a research lab. It was a place where time and space were controlled, manipulated by unseen hands. It wasn't just about researching time. It was about controlling it, taming it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was part of an experiment. The rules, the anomalies, the shadows, they weren't accidents. They were all carefully constructed. I had been led here to participate, but not by choice. I was a subject in a much larger game. The truth was finally clear. The facility wasn't just experimenting with time, it was experimenting with memories. My memories. And the worst part, the more I remembered, the more I realized that I wasn't the first subject. I wouldn't be the last. The experiment had been going on long before I got here, and it was going to continue long after. I could feel the walls closing in again, my heart racing as the full weight of my situation sank in. This wasn't just a facility. It was a prison, and I was its next subject. I wasn't just trapped in a building. I was trapped in a loop, a cycle of time controlled by forces I couldn't understand, forces that had already begun to erase my past and would soon erase my future. And now, I realized, there was no way out. The time distortions were becoming unbearable. One moment, it was 2 a.m. The next, it was 9 a.m. The seconds twisted and bent around me. I felt like I was stuck in a suspended loop, floating in a place where time no longer had meaning. The air around me grew heavier, thicker with every passing hour. Every time I glanced at the clock, it seemed to be mocking me. Jumps forward, backward, forward again. Nothing felt stable anymore. The building itself felt like a living organism, breathing and shifting in ways that defied reality. I tried to rationalize it, but the truth was clear. I was trapped in a cycle of time I could neither escape nor control. Every hour, every day, it all started to blend together until it felt like I had been here forever. And the more I thought about it, the more certain I became. This was no accident. This was deliberate. I walked through the halls, desperate to find some sort of escape. But the facility felt like it was shifting beneath me, warping as I moved. I was walking in the same halls, but they weren't the same anymore. The walls seemed to close in around me, the lights flickered more frequently, and a sense of dread settled over my shoulders like a weight I couldn't shake off. The silence was oppressive. But then, footsteps. I froze. The sound echoed sharp and heavy behind me. I turned, expecting to see someone, but there was no one. I held my breath, the footsteps growing louder, but still there was nothing there. Nothing visible. It was as if the sound was coming from inside my mind, a cruel reminder that I was not alone, even though I couldn't see who or what was watching me. I pressed forward, trying to ignore the growing panic in my chest. But that's when I saw it. At the end of the hallway, the door, the one I had been avoiding, was there again. I knew I wasn't imagining it. The door that had never existed before, the one that had appeared and disappeared in the footage, was now real, solid, and standing in front of me. I walked toward it, unable to stop myself. The air grew colder as I approached. I felt a chill running through my bones. The walls seemed to pulse, as if the building itself were alive, watching, waiting. I reached for the door, my hand trembling. Before I could touch the handle, a figure appeared in front of me. I stopped. It was him. The other, me. The figure stood just a few feet away, staring at me. There was no mistaking it. It was me, but not me. Older, more worn, his eyes cold and calculating. The kind of eyes that had seen things I had not. His lips barely moved as he spoke, but his words were clear. "You're here, James. I knew you'd come." I backed away, but he stepped forward, moving closer with each word. "No matter how much you fight, you can't escape. We are part of the same thing. We are one." I shook my head, trying to ignore the growing knot in my stomach. He wasn't me. He couldn't be. But the way he spoke, the way he knew things, I couldn't explain it. The walls around me started to close in again, and I could feel my thoughts becoming fuzzy, uncertain. He took another step toward me. His eyes glinted with something I couldn't place. "You're starting to remember, aren't you?" he said, his voice smooth but filled with an unsettling knowing. "You know this place. You've been here before, James." I felt the world shift beneath me. The air became thick, like I was suffocating. I tried to take a step back, but my feet felt like they were rooted to the floor. I was stuck. The figure's gaze bored into me, his smile growing more twisted. "You can't keep asking questions, James. You can't keep trying to escape." I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My throat was tight, my breath shallow. The figure in front of me was a reflection, but a reflection of what? Of a future version of myself or something else? Was I being controlled? Was he me? Or was I him? "It's too late for you now, James. The facility owns you. You've already failed." His words were like daggers, each one piercing deeper. Failure. That word echoed in my mind as I turned away from him, my legs heavy, my mind racing. I couldn't escape him. I couldn't escape this place. The walls were closing in. The figures were getting closer. The reality I knew was slipping through my fingers, and I was being dragged down a path I couldn't control. But I had to get out. I rushed down the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest, my head spinning. The world around me seemed to warp with every step I took. The lights flickered more violently now, the temperature dropping. I could feel the eyes of the facility on me, watching me as I stumbled forward. And then I heard it again. Footsteps. But this time, they were different. They were too familiar. They were mine. I was following myself, but I couldn't stop. The sounds grew louder, closing in on me. The echo of my own footsteps was chasing me. I turned a corner, but there he was again, the figure, the other me. "You can't leave, James. You're starting to remember everything." I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. My legs wouldn't obey. My mind was in a fog. It was like I was being trapped in a nightmare that wouldn't end. The figure took another step toward me. I could feel the air growing thick, heavy, as if it were crushing me. I was running out of time. The door, the exit. I had to get to it. But every time I tried, the door would disappear. The hallway stretched endlessly, and I was always one step behind myself. And then I heard the voice again. "You're not supposed to be here, James. You were never supposed to leave. You belong to us now." I reached the door again, my hand trembling as I grabbed the handle. But just as I thought I had a way out, the world shifted again. The lights flickered, the shadows twisted, the door was gone. The air felt heavier now. The room had become a cage. The walls were closing in. The figure was closer now. His voice was clear, louder than ever. You will never escape. I turned, looking around desperately. But the hallway stretched on, endless. I was trapped. I had been marked, caught in the cycle of the experiment. There was no way out, no escape. I was no longer sure where I was or how long I had been here. The building seemed to shift around me like it was playing tricks on my mind. The hallways stretched impossibly far, bending in ways that didn't make sense. Rooms appeared and disappeared without warning, and the time distortions, the ones I'd thought were temporary, had now become permanent. I stood in one of the halls, paralyzed by the silence that had settled around me. Everything had become distorted, the walls, the air, even the light. I couldn't trust anything anymore. The feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. I tried to shake it off, but it clung to me, suffocating me. The whispers had started again, faint at first, but growing louder. I was being followed, though I couldn't see anyone, but the very air around me seemed to be alive, crawling with unseen eyes. I looked around the hallway, feeling the walls close in. There was no way out. The exit door I had seen before, the one I thought would set me free, was now missing. It was replaced by another long stretch of corridor. The building had become an endless maze, and I was its prisoner. I couldn't breathe. Every step I took felt like it was pulling me deeper into the grip of the facility. The building, once silent and passive, now felt...
It smelled it. Whiskey, he said. He looked again. Drops of red, small, scattered. He pointed. Blood. The inspector stepped forward. From a wound. Yes, Poirot said. Not fatal. Not heavy. A cut. Maybe head. He knelt. Touched the wood. It stuck. Dried pool. He rose. Moved to the right wall. A rug, out of place. Corner folded. He lifted it. Another stain. More blood, he said. He touched the chair's back. Torn cloth. One fiber stuck. Struggle, Hastings asked. Short one, Poirot replied. Poirot opened a drawer in the table. Empty. Except a matchbook. A torn envelope. He inspected both. Used recently, he said. He pointed to the second glass. No fingerprints. Cleaned, the inspector asked. Wiped, not washed. Poirot pulled out tweezers. Checked the seat. Small, white specks. Sticky. He sniffed. Paused. Chlorohydrate. Hastings blinked. Knockout drug? Yes. Poirot looked again at the broken glass. Possibly in here. Blackwood was drugged first, the inspector asked. Poirot nodded. Then hit. Then bled. He moved to the far corner. A coat hook. Empty. He looked at the floor again. More fibers. He picked up one. Red thread. He handed it to Hastings. Matches the trouser. Poirot turned to the window, closed, latched. No one escaped here, he said. Back door, the inspector asked. Not forced, no signs. Poirot stood still, arms behind his back. He scanned the room again. No photos, no papers, no personal items. He said, whoever used this place used it only for this. Hastings asked. A setup? Yes. Poirot checked his pocket watch. Walked to the center, stopped, then said, Blackwood was killed here. Even silence carries weight. Poirot circled the room again. He stopped near the fireplace. Ashes in the tray. Burnt paper fragments. He reached in with tweezers. Pulled out a half-burnt scrap. No words left, just edges, blue ink. He dropped it into a paper envelope. Poirot walked to the far wall, picked up a tin cup. Inside, 4 cigarette butts. He examined each one, carefully, then spoke. Machine rolled, filtered, standard issue. Hastings asked, same brand as Peton's? Yes, Poirot replied. He sniffed one. Same tobacco, same scent. The inspector stepped forward. That's not proof. Poirot nodded. Number, but it narrows the list. He opened the cabinet near the table. Empty. He ran his fingers along the inner edge. Dust, untouched. He checked the floor near the window. White powder, same as before. He scraped it. Drug residue. Poirot stood, looked again at the overturned chair. He pointed. Violent shift. Back leg cracked. He traced a faint line from the chair to the rug. Dragged, he said. Hastings crossed his arms. So Pita was here? Poirot nodded. Likely, maybe not alone. The
hallways. The figure of the other me stepped forward again, his steps slow and deliberate, his eyes piercing. You've only just begun to understand. The facility controls everything. You're a part of something far greater than you realize. I backed up, trying to clear my head. I needed to get out, but I couldn't. The walls, the shadows, the whispers, they were all closing in. It was too much. The pressure was too great. The time distortions, the hallways, the figures. It was all too much. I didn't know who I was anymore. And then I saw it. A doorway, a real one. It wasn't the same one I'd tried before. It was new. But as I reached for it, I heard the voice again. You can't leave, James. You're part of the cycle. There's no escape. I stepped forward anyway. The door didn't budge. The figure of myself appeared in the doorway, blocking my way. You've been in the cycle too long. His voice was chilling. You'll never leave. I turned away, but the hall stretched out before me, no exit in sight. I was trapped. Again. The sense of hopelessness crushed me. The building was alive and I was its prisoner. I wasn't just trapped in this building, I was trapped in time, trapped in a loop. There was no escape. I had no choice but to keep walking, down a hallway that would never end, toward a door that would never open.